like to welcome an exceptional speaker who is an expert on future of leadership, Omar L. Harris. Omar is a former pharmaceutical general manager, Intent Consulting founder, motivational speaker, and best-selling author with over 20 years experience building high-performance organizations on 4 continents and consulting for companies in the pharma, energy, banking, and technology sectors. Having managed multi-billion-dollar brands and led extensive organizations while working in the Middle East, Asia, Latin America, and the US, Omar innovated blueprints for Jedi leadership, and Jedi stands for Leading with Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, and servant leadership, and 20 team performance acceleration principles that can be applied by leaders at all levels of professional experience. A fun fact about Omar is that he has a new book coming out on 25th of June, so this Friday, and the book's title is Be a Jedi Leader, Not a Boss. Welcome, Omar, and thank you so much for finding the time today to talk to me about this rising style of leadership, which can potentially revolutionize the way we lead in the world.
Thank you, Izabela. So happy to be with you today.
Thank you again. And let me just jump in. So I know that maybe some people in the audience today are thinking Jedi leadership, Star Wars. Is that what it is?
Well, it's not Star Wars, but if you think about who the Jedi were, who they are in that mythology and in that text, they are the forces for good in the universe. And so in that sense, Jedi, yes, because, Jedi leaders hopefully are going to be forces for good, not just for profit, but also for employees, customers, communities, and the environment. So, and we need leaders who go beyond the profit motive and who are really dedicated to becoming forces for good and utilizing the platform of business to do more good than bad in the world. We've done plenty of bad. It's time for us to start doing good.
So true. And we've definitely had enough of toxic leadership in this world. And some experts even go as far as to say that we are in a crisis of leadership these days.
Fully agree with that.
So let us just look again at what JEDI stands for now in all seriousness. So it is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion.
Yes.
Why these 4, Omar?
So there's a lot of alphabets that have been going around, alphabet soup, DEI, B, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, diversity, equity, and inclusion, diversity and inclusion. You have a lot of things going around in terms of people trying to define the space. But I think that there's enough difference and distinction between these 4 words that if you put them together, when it's justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, you really understand what the work is that has to be done. And all the work is different and it builds on itself. So for example, all the organizations focused on diversity and inclusion today, but if they don't lean into equity and justice, they're really not going to capitalize on their diversity, and they're not going to truly create places of inclusion, because there are inequities and injustices in every corporation in the world that have to be addressed. And that's why my point of view is we have to address these issues internally before we can see the positive externalities of our work. And what we've seen in the last couple of years is companies leaning into the space more for externalities, more for a positive boost in their share price, or more for PR purposes, and not doing the hard, difficult internal work. And, when I was a general manager in Indonesia and Brazil, we looked at these types of things as business risks. At the end of the day, there are companies that have lost over $4 billion of market capitalization in the last 3 years just because of discrimination and discrimination lawsuits and things of that nature. So this is not soft stuff. This is business risk that we're dealing with. And so that's why JEDI, because you have to tackle, there are systemic injustices that exist in every company, not just racial injustices, but I'm talking about just generalized injustices. There are inequities. Everyone knows about the gender pay gap, but there's a lot of other inequities that are happening within our corporations today. We're not really maximizing diversity. So what happens is we bring people in from different backgrounds today, and we make them conform to a culture and to a value set. So we're not really extracting the diversity. People can't be themselves in our corporate walls. They have to be like Googlers or be whatever the word is for our culture and how we operate. Facebookers, they have to be us. They have to be like us in order for them to fit in. And diversity is all about fitting out. It's not about fitting in. And then inclusion is really leaders leaning into creating a safe space for their employees and really making them feel valued and that they belong and they can speak up and that they're safe. And so these are four distinct issues that have to be tackled. That if you don't, and for me, the one that people want to leave off is the J. They want to leave off the justice. They're like, what do corporations have to do with justice? Well, think about all the injustices that are happening within corporations today that are being carried over from society. That's what we have to deal with.
And as you said, this can be very costly for organizations unless they really take care of this. So it's common sense, isn't it?
Common sense is not always common, Izabela.
Yes, I know. But when you really look at this, right, it is common sense, and this is good business sense as well.
It is good business sense, which is why, Ray Dalio and Larry Fink and the BlackRocks of this world, when it comes to at least the environmental governance space, they're saying, listen, if any company that doesn't have an environmental plan on the books right now in 2021 is not a worthwhile investment. And I'm saying the exact same thing. Any company that doesn't have a Jedi plan on the books that they're actually working through is going to be a horrible investment 5-10 years from now because they didn't do the work, and they're going to be paying fines. They're not going to be able to attract the diverse talent they need to innovate, and they're going to have a horrible reputation in the marketplace and with their customers. So this is fundamentally about really what is business all about? Like, what are we trying to accomplish in our businesses? How do we drive profits? How do we derive profits? What do we utilize those profits for? And so this is fundamental common sense work that always should have been in place that now we're just now getting to because the Zeitgeist has arrived at this point in 2021.
This is also a very valid point, and we talked about a few weeks ago that this is the idea whose time has come, because yes. You said, that probably 20 years ago, this wouldn't have taken off.
No, it wouldn't have taken off because at that time, you're looking at the internet boom was 20 years ago, right? So you're looking at the end of the first age of the internet and the second golden age of the internet, which is the Google, Facebook, Amazon age. And so we were still, although technology was kind of enhancing our lives, we were still looking at the top-down hierarchical structure at that time. It wasn't for maybe 10 or 12 years that people realized that these hierarchies are not actually delivering productivity. So the tech companies began shifting their structure and their model of operating, whereas, different sectors, banking and energy and pharmaceuticals and healthcare, they have not really jumped on the new leadership paradigms, which is why they're innovating much slower than a lot of the tech companies. It's not just because they're tech; it's because their leadership brand and style has transformed, whereas everyone else has kind of stayed in the past.
So you talk about this also in this book, the Servant Leaders Manifesto, and here, yes. Page 20, you have this model. So I'm just showing it to people, and we will also include it later in the video. And here you talk about the standard hierarchy, which is the top is the boss, then
yes.
leaders, then value creators, and the customers at the bottom. And then yes. The model is the inverted pyramid, where you have the customers on top, right. the value creators, then success enablers, and then servant leaders, right?
Yes. So it's a fundamental reorientation. So we have to go back to look at how we arrived and why the top-down hierarchy is so seductive. Well, because in our life, I bring everything back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and when you think about Maslow, you think about a lot of people. So as you succeed in your corporate career, whatever it is, it enables you to kind of fill in those bottom two levels of the pyramid, the food, clothing, shelter, the perception of safety. All that is filled in economically by succeeding in corporations. But at a certain point, your ego needs. So, for example, you're not getting enough love and belonging. So your esteem is not where it needs to be, and you're not being altruistic, which are the top three levels of the pyramid. So the ego takes over as you begin to climb the corporate ladder. And the ego needs begin to take over. And the more ego needs take over, the more toxicity persists within the individual and then within the system with which the individual is operating. If they're a leader, that toxicity goes right from them to everybody else.
Because the ego is always hungry, isn't it?
ego's enormously hungry, and it becomes all about the leader, the boss, and not about the people, and not about and least of all, the customers. I mean, there's so many companies that abhor their customers. They actually, don't. They have placed no value on the customer, and these companies have been allowed to persist for too long. Yeah.
So, just maybe taking back to my question about the time of this idea of Jedi and servant leadership. I mean, servant leadership has been around for a long time. But this is a different environment in which we operate right now. And it is not only because of the pandemic, although largely so, but when you think about the generations that are coming into the work right now, we talk about millennials, we talk about the Gen Z. They have very different values, and they appreciate very different things, and they demand very different things from the leadership, don't they?
They do. And I think the one thing that gets left out is that they've been educated completely differently than, Gen Xers and boomers were educated. They've been educated, first of all, with technology. They've always had a voice. In their classroom, they've always had a voice. Their experience was individualized as much as possible, because education moved from a large classroom model to more of an individual attention to each student's needs model. And so they're used to that level of attention. They're used to that feeling of belonging, and they're used to being able to contribute and their voice being heard. And all of a sudden, these people go from, my voice matters, to coming into a corporation where, listen, you need to work your way up, and we don't care what you have to say until you get to this level. So you can't speak up until you're a middle manager or whatever it is. We don't. Until then, keep your head down and just shut up. And that message is just so tone deaf for these, young people coming into corporations. I mean, the millennials are in their mid-30s now. They're not that young anymore, but they're still, have that principle and those values. They're looking for purpose. They're looking for more, and they're getting less. And this is why the global disengagement rates, when Gallup measures it, it's flat to declining every single year, because leadership itself is not evolving. And what's valued in leadership is not evolving. And there's a big disconnect happening between the leaders and then the worker force now. And then as they emerge to middle managers, this is the confusing point, which is, okay, so what kind of leader am I going to be? That's why I wrote the Servant Leaders Manifesto, because middle managers have to choose what kind of leader they want to be. They don't have to follow that boss archetype anymore. They can reinvent leadership for themselves and actually lead into an old idea made new, which is servant leadership, and then hopefully aspire to the next level, which is Jedi leadership.
And I love what you just said about the archetype of a boss, because we've been holding on to this for such a long time. And, it really came with the first industrial revolution, didn't it?
Yes, it did.
Where you had this manager who was overseeing the workers, and the workers were very replaceable. Their work was very automated. But look at where we are today. We are in the fourth industrial revolution, where it is all about knowledge and idea and creativity and collaboration. So what kind of a leader is necessary to leverage this and to motivate people? And as you said, people today, they don't look for just a job. They look for purpose. They want something that transcends them, that they can dedicate their life to.
Yeah. We've seen a lot of us, millennials have seen their parents work 20 years, 30 years for a company that made them disposable. And they're like, I don't want that destiny for myself, which is why you see millennials jumping around a lot more. They're like, listen, I'm going to get what I need to get for me to be successful. I'm not going to be loyal to a company that's not doing anything for me. And that's an obvious and logical response to the way corporations have treated employees as disposable objects, even though the employee is more important today than ever before, because they're the person who are creating value for the stakeholders. And without that direct and powerful relationship where the people who are in contact with the customer get the right level of support and get the barriers removed from their ability to add value to customers and other stakeholders, we don't innovate, we don't succeed. And that's what we're getting into now, is we're seeing, you see GDP around the world grinding to a standstill. Why is that? Why is that when we have better technology than ever before? Why is the gross domestic product of most nations outside of China grinding to a halt? Getting low single digits. Well, it's because of this problem as it relates to productivity and engagement that's not being solved. And the fact that, we've sold, hundreds of thousands of millions of, books by John C. Maxwell and Stephen R. Covey and all these great luminaries who've all said the same thing that I'm saying right now. People bought the books, they put them on the bookshelf, and they did not follow the instructions. And so that's why there's still space to keep communicating and writing about these issues, and which is why I wrote the book that I wrote, because I wanted to really cut through and just say, listen, this is non-negotiable now. This is not a option anymore for managers. I'm not talking to the C-suite. I've kind of not given up on the C-suite, but C-suite is going to be the C-suite. But middle managers have a choice, and they need to make the right choice for their people and for themselves to achieve their overarching goals.
And that's why I am so happy that you're talking to our audience, because that's exactly this audience, the junior executives, and they still have that choice ahead of them. What kind of leader am I supposed to be? What kind of leader can I be? And what is the best style of leadership for my people and for myself? Because I think, and we've also talked about it, the really good leaders, they know that they need to lead themselves first.
Exactly. It starts with the self. How do you lead anyone else if you can't? Leadership is influence and a motivation. If you can't influence and motivate yourself, how are you going to influence and motivate anyone else with authenticity? Now, remember, we talk about influence versus authority. So positional authority is a way to get things done. You definitely can tell someone what to do and direct their traffic. But when people adopt your cause as their own, or they adopt a bigger cause as their own that everyone's working towards, that's when the magic happens in organizations and communities in society. That's when it really happens. So I think that that's what we're trying to do, is we start with the self. And the reason why we start with the self is we need to recognize that the ego will take over if we're not taking care of ourselves. So in order for us to eliminate those ego needs and get out of that toxic space, we have to take care of ourselves, and love ourselves fully. I talk about the 5 types of love in the book, and love ourselves fully so that we can then lead with love for others, which is provide in the same space and give everyone else the same opportunity to love themselves so that they can also bring their best selves to the larger purpose that we're trying to achieve. Now, if we're just making widgets, we don't need any of this stuff. So 1900, 1910, 1915, nobody cares about purpose. We're building widgets. We're building, a better, access or whatever it is. But today, to capitalize on all the potential that we have with the technology and the education and the people, we need to lean into this different space.
So true. And the world has really changed. As you said, this is not 100 years ago. This is not even 50 years ago. We are in this new world, and especially after the pandemic, where we faced such enormous global crisis, and, we, each of us individually and as organizations, as countries, I think people realized that, okay, this is one life that we have, and there better be something worth my effort here. And we know, because you mentioned the Gallup, we know from the statistics that about 80% of workers, I'm laughing when I'm saying it, but 80% of workers globally are disengaged. And the remaining 20% are disengaged actively.
Yes.
What does this mean? Is that they are actively sabotaging the organizations in which they work. So this is not about the people. It is about the quality of our leadership.
Yes. Gallup has another very sobering statistic, which is that I think 82% of those chosen for leadership, managerial positions, are the wrong people. How do we get something we do all the time? Like, companies do this we should be masters of finding the right people to manage other people. At this point, we've been doing it for so long, and 82% of people promoted into management are the wrong people to manage others. How does that even? It's amazing that the world hasn't ground to a halt at this point. It's actually, when I look at that statistic, I'm like, how is it that we're even here? How is it a business? It just goes to show that a little goes a long way. A great idea, some of these great product ideas go a long way. Uber goes around the world with the most toxic business leadership culture we've ever heard of. What was happening internally at Uber was horrible. But then you have this amazing idea. It's a great idea and it works. So, we have to separate but there could be so much more value added. I was going around the world, and I would always talk to my Uber drivers about their experience with the company. And all of them they appreciated the additional opportunity to earn an income, but they hated dealing with the company.
And you know what I also said, Uber had its reckoning, at least
Yeah.
this had. So I think we are also in this day and age where those leaders are held accountable publicly.
Yes. Yes.
And this
Yes.
is also the you know the situation that it is possible right now because there's such a social pressure. You know, we have the media, we can speak about things, we can make things known, people can speak up. This is the technology allows this freedom for people to speak up against those toxic behaviors. And this is great because it's really time that we reinvent leadership.
It's been time, Izabela. It's been far past time. But okay, we're here now. Let's deal with the current, deal with the here and now, and now, you know, which is why, I mean, I just written the Servant Leaders Manifesto. I just published it in April last year, and then the George Floyd protests and everything happened, and I'm like, it doesn't go far enough. It doesn't go far enough. It's not enough. Being a servant leader is a great stepping stone, but it's not enough because we have to tackle these bigger issues. What is the purpose of an organization? What's the purpose of a company? You know, and if we don't have purpose, then we're gonna denigrate the environment. We're going to destroy communities. We're going to ignore customers, and we're going to disengage employees. Now, we may deliver value to shareholders, but for how long? But for how long? And not all shareholders are made equal. I mean, who are we listening to as shareholders? Are we listening to the hedge funds and the day traders? Well, I don't want day traders influencing a CEO decision-making process. Your institutional investors, your dividend, your income investor, those are the people you should be listening to, not the people who are trying to bet against, you know, short you or bet against your future or whatnot. I mean, why are we allowing this type of trading to influence our decision making and take us away from our larger purpose? Every company today has a larger purpose. Every company is built fundamentally on a community. Every company does damage to the environment. Every company does damage to the environment and needs to address that issue. Every company can be innovating and adding so much more value and representing their customers, not just providing products to customers, but actually adding value and representing their customers' beliefs. And it all starts with how we treat our employees, which is where the Jedi leadership piece comes in, which is really about making sure that we are maximizing diversity and inclusion by eliminating inequity and eradicating injustice internally.
So let me ask you, how can I become a Jedi leader?
The first step is to lead yourself. So talk about in Servant Leaders Manifesto, the MHT, the mindset, habits, and tracking. So it's about going from reactive to proactive. So what can I do, and doing the things you can do that are in your control.
So this is emotional intelligence, isn't it?
It is fundamentally taking accountability for yourself, but also implementing high performance habits. We talk about this. I mean, what separates, you know, the most successful people in the world from the least successful? They have different habits that anybody can do. They wake up early, they read every day, they drink enough water, they sleep enough, they meditate, they have gratitude journaling and they're grateful for gratitude. They exercise. They have high performance habits, and they hold themselves accountable. No one has to hold them accountable for anything. They hold themselves accountable. So start with yourself, right? Then you orient yourself towards the people. So the value creators in your organization. So you start asking the question, what do my people need to be successful? And once you lean into that space, you start listening differently to your employees, and you start uncovering not only barriers in the way they're trying to, you know, deliver value to customers, but also you're going to start hearing about inequities and injustices and instances of where they didn't feel that they belonged and they couldn't speak up, or where they didn't feel their diversity, they didn't see diverse people like themselves around them, that didn't feel they had a chance to succeed. You're going to start hearing these things. The moment you lean in and start solving these problems, you are emerging, you are becoming a Jedi leader. That's basically the bridge from where you are today to, through servant leadership, to becoming a Jedi leader.
So lead yourself and really become aware of the voices of the people that you lead and lead
Exactly.
to whatever they tell you.
And start acting on it. Start taking action. Like, don't just hear it and listen to it, but also leverage the full value of empathy, which I define as listening, understanding, and validating experiences, and then solving problems. Once you start solving problems, people will feel more included. They will feel their diversity is valued. They will see the inequities begin to diminish. They will see injustices be eradicated, and they will bring their best selves to work every day for you, for the organization, for the customers, and everyone will be successful.
I think the leaders of the biggest organizations actually caught up with this idea. And in 2019, they signed a manifesto. This was,
Yes.
I think, 200 companies. It was a round table, right? Do I remember?
Yes. The Business Roundtable Forum, the top 200 CEOs, and the U.S. CEOs, it's very important, the U.S. CEOs signed this declaration and transformed the definition of a corporation away from shareholder capitalism, which is just simply providing profits to shareholders, to stakeholder capitalism, which is providing value to at least these 5 stakeholders: employees, customers, communities, the environment, and shareholders. The only thing they didn't say is how they were going to do it, which is why I wrote the book, because Jedi leadership is a very important how. Like, how are you going to do it?
No, you got 200 leaders, Omar, to send the copy of the book to.
Yes. Definitely.
Tell me, like, how does Jedi leadership impact stakeholder capitalism, this new idea of stakeholder capitalism?
So for me, it's a straight line. Once again, if you remove customers from that inverted hierarchy picture that you showed earlier, that could be any stakeholder, right? So the interface with that stakeholder. So what is your interface with the environment? Let's take the environment as a stakeholder, right? Well, every employee in your corporation, from the janitor to the CEO, has an impact on the environment. Their decision-making, how they do their work, principally how they do the processes of the work, all have an impact negatively, neutrally, or positively on the environment. Our approach to travel and entertainment and expenses. I mean, all these things, which is a base of business. Let's take T&E. The more we travel, the more we take boondoggles, the more we utilize airplanes, we are fundamentally negatively impacting the environment. We are creating injustice for the environment. So the WebEx technology and things, video conference technology has been this good since about 2007, Izabela.
I know.
But it took a global pandemic, for CFOs to be like, oh, we can actually save a lot of money if we just do more virtual meetings. Oh, we're a global company, we can just do this all day long. Then that actually is a more efficient way, an effective way, and a carbon neutral way of impacting the environment. Now, if you were all using Zoom, the question is, Zoom, what are you doing as our supplier to make sure that your carbon footprint is neutral? So you have servers, you have tech ops, you have energy expenditure, you have water expenditure. So what are you doing at Zoom? What is Zoom doing to make us feel comfortable that they actually are focused on the environment as a stakeholder as well, not just trying to get us to buy subscriptions on their platform so that they can get market share? So you see how it works? You basically look at the stakeholder, you try to drive positive value for the stakeholder, and that transforms the questions and the commentary and the processes that are happening internally in the organization. And then Jedi leaders are just basically doing the work to make sure that we achieve these desired endpoints for these new stakeholders that we haven't ever had to really prove value to in the past. Now, Izabela, I will say that the Business Roundtable Forum was not 100% altruistic. The reason why they wanted to transform the definition of a corporation away from shareholder capitalism to stakeholder capitalism was because activist investors in the last 10, 12, 15 years have had a disproportionate influence on their job security. And so if I'm only being measured on one metric, which is shareholder profits, then my job is quite fragile. But if I can change it and say we have 5 numbers now that we have to be looking at, or 5 stakeholders that we have to satisfy, then it allows me more time. It buys me time to basically keep my job. So it wasn't 100% altruistic, but we can hold them accountable because they said it. And so it's all about, okay, I don't care why you said it. So now it's time for accountability.
You know, I'm not as naive as to think that they did it because they thought that this was the right thing to do. Just because it was the right thing to do. I know that, you know, as CEOs, they really need to think about how their business is going to make money, because business that doesn't make money and doesn't bring profit is not a good business, right? So this is your job. But on the other hand, I think that, as you said, they are beginning to understand that time is shifting, that people's attention is shifting. The values that people have when they come to work in those organizations or any organization, that has also shifted. And especially those new generations that are coming in, they are very oriented around those values of protecting their future, essentially.
Yes.
And they really know how to hold these leaders accountable.
They do. Look at Greta Thunberg. I mean, 16 years old, creating global movements on environmental activism, just by shaming adults into action. I mean, like, it's brilliant. Like, you know, and this is the same thing that's happening within organizations now, you know, movements like Black Lives Matter, you know, shaming organizations to making public statements of support for, you know, societal injustice for a disenfranchised population.
This is such a shame that we need to shame these organizations to make them do the right thing. It would have been so much more impactful if they did it because it's the right thing. But I think, again, we are talking about the time. So, you know, today we have all this wonderful media. We have the social media that we can be very vocal on and voice our opinions and make our demands. And I think there's another aspect of those new days, this new time, especially after the pandemic. We keep hearing that there is this big resignation coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Omar? That, you know, the impact of the pandemic is going to be that so many people are going to resign from their jobs. And for the moment, it's because there's such an insecurity still because of the pandemic. People are holding on to their jobs, but they're also thinking, maybe this job that I have is not exactly what I want in my life. Many people, like, for example, the clients that I have, some of them come to me and say, I don't want to work for this organization. I want to start my own business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this time of reckoning for organizations is coming simply because people want purpose in their work.
Yeah.
You know, you cannot motivate people. I remember you said, you know, as a boss, you can tell people what to do because you have a title. But I think those days are over, aren't they?
Well, their time is limited. I mean, I think that, I mean, I talk about the tsunami of change that's happening. And literally in the last week, we've seen so many articles talking about this great resignation. That's exactly the response that will shake corporations to their very core. I mean, if, you know, not only is it a talent war, but if people are actively opting out of the corporate space for the first time, because there's a lot of different ways to make income now without having to work for a boss. I mean, there's a lot of ways, you know, real estate, investing in cryptocurrency, you know, starting your own business. There's a lot of niche ways to eke out a living, you know. So it's not, you know, the preferred destination is just going to be, you assume it's going to be a corporation. But, you know, just like we've seen kids opting out of university, you know, it's this trend has been happening for a long time. And now we're ending in this great resignation surge after the pandemic where people had time to really think about, you know, do I really want to do, and you can see how the company managed work-life balance in the pandemic. You know, who set boundaries? Or were you on conference calls till 3 o'clock in the morning every day? You know, like, I don't, you know, this is for the birds. Like, I don't need to do this. So I think this is exactly the reckoning of, you know, Boston, toxic Boston. But the issue is, you know, those people are still going to be around. They're not going to give away their job because they can't do anything else.
Yeah, I know. And, you know, you hear again in the news that some of these bosses demand that people come back to offices no matter what happens. But again, you know, time will tell whether this is the right decision, simply because people are going to question this decision. If I can work and be effective from home, why must I be back in the office?
If I can generate an income and take care of myself and my family, why deal with the nonsense? because there's no purpose. I mean, why am I working to make someone else successful? Which is what Boston is about. You work for me. You are working to my whims and my attitudes and my negative energy, and basically your job is to make me look good. How many times have you heard this? Make your boss look good.
Oh,
Look
yeah.
good by making your boss look good. This is like every article in the 90s was about look good by making your boss look good.
And
We were, yeah.
We know that people don't leave organizations, but they leave those toxic bosses. And look, again, when we look at the trends in the workplace, we see the epidemic of burnout as well. And
Yes,
people have had enough because they have had enough of paying that price with their own health and their own mental health. And now that they really have options beyond this typical desk jobs, I think that they will really take those opportunities.
definitely. I mean, an article I read today was about this is not pessimism, optimism. People would not leave their jobs if they didn't think there's something better on the other side. And once again, there have been articles for years how to do your side hustle while you're working at the main corporation. So there's been a groundswell of this kind of like, how do I supplement my income so that I can know how to 100% be dependent on these people? And once you get that to a certain level, okay, well, I'm secure. I can, my bottom two levels of the pyramid are good. I'm moving out of this space. I'm going to do something that adds value to me. Unfortunately, when everyone's being selfish and looking at their own selves, nothing gets done positively in the world. And this is the great indictment of corporate leadership. Is that it's come to this, that we've disengaged people to the point that now it's going to be very difficult to get positive things done in the world if people check out or opt out of working for corporations.
But as you said, this is just a choice, and I think it's being optimistic. Let's be optimistic. These people who will leave those organizations that are toxic and force them to those ancient, archaic ways of working, they are going to open new businesses. They're going to create new wonderful things simply because we believe in them. This will be their passion. We talk about passion so much in leadership trainings, but people can be so passionate about things. They can be so engaged if they have a purpose that resonates with them. And just being in a physical office, from 9 to 5, just sitting at a desk, that does not resonate with anybody, I think.
No, especially if you're working on a team and your manager has no idea how to lead a team properly. So, I mean, my first book I wrote with Leaderboard, the DNA of High Performance Teams, was all about that. Like, it's all about team today. It's not about individual stars. It's all about A teams. And how do you create an A team if you're a leader today? So that's what you're leading. You're leading a group of diverse people and trying to get the best out of them.
How do you
Well, I mean, one of the main premises of that is that you see the people and not the role. First of all, you have to hire well.
And you talk about, you have a term for this, right? Not interviewing, but interviewing.
Well, there's interviewing, which comes after you've hired, but the most important step is the whom, which is, so basically taking pedigree, education, and previous experience and put them on the side for a bit. What makes a high performance team? Well, people who work hard, who have shared passion, who are solution oriented, and are mature enough to handle inevitable conflict and disagreement that happens. So I operationalize this in Leaderboard with an interview process called the whom, where you can actually grade someone's work ethic, heart, I call it, which is shared passion, optimism, a solution orientation, and maturity on a 32-question interview list that allows you to actually see where someone stands up against the whom, and help you make a better, more informed hiring decision versus just pedigree, previous experience, and previous success. Because it's not, someone being successful in a previous environment is not necessarily indicative of them being successful in your environment. So I would rather strip all that away and just focus on the 4 words that, and since I implemented this process when I was a general manager, started it in Indonesia, Izabela, I never made a bad hire. Not one.
Wow.
Not one. I had a 100% success rate, which was startling to even myself.
This is really amazing.
Yeah. So once you hire for the whom, then the next key step is interviewing, which is, it's the new leader's opportunity to build trust with their new employee. And so it's your job to create a bond individually with each person on your team first, which requires you to demonstrate vulnerability, talk about your strengths and your weaknesses, learn about theirs, talk about trust builders and trust breakers, and have this kind of like a mutual contract of respect and understanding for how you're going to support them as they come into your organization. If you have that with everyone on your team, an individual bond, it makes it so much easier to lead the team because everyone's connected to you now. So they may not be connected to each other, but they're definitely connected to you, and you're the spoke in this model. You're the you're the hub of this model, and so you make that connecting point. You're the glue that keeps everyone together. It's your job as leader to be the glue, and then finally, then you can begin extracting the team DNA, which is really who are my best executors, who are my best influencers, who are the relationship builders on my team, and who are my strategic thinkers. How do I combine that in the right proportion and synergistically so that we can then achieve our purpose and high performance? And that's the three main lessons of Leaderboard, told through a fictional narrative, actually. And then you get the lessons at the end of the book.
And I know that you are going to give us access to downloadable version of that, right?
Yes.
Coming in the end, we'll give the link to this download. So I'm just looking at my list of questions because I have so many and the time is running out. So I will just have to select something that I can still ask you. Oh dear, I have just too many questions, Omar.
Let's keep going. Let's go. I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. So here's one. What does social justice have to do with business?
Perfect. So this is one that's fundamental. So once again, I'm looking at the lens of the employee and looking internally, not externally. So I use an example in the book of Nike, and Nike has a broad base of African American males who are avid consumers of Nike products. Not just, everybody buys Nike products, but like African American males in the basketball shoe segment are disproportionately sized employee base. And it also happens to be that African American males are disproportionately being imprisoned in America due to a history of systemic racism and also privately owned prisons, which are basically incentivizing law and order to lock up more people so that they can run their privately owned prisons and hit their KPIs and their metrics on human lives. Productivity built off of human lives is modern day slavery, basically. So should Nike take on privately owned prisons? Well, yeah, because your customers and your future employees are in that group. Why would you not want to source employees from the community that dominates, spends more than anyone else for your products? That's your employee pool. It's also your customer pool. If you want to protect that, you have to lean into social justice and weigh in against privately owned prisons, and weigh in on the books around laws and legislation that is disproportionately locking up your future employee and customer base. And so it comes down to common sense like that. That's just one example of how social justice makes good business, literally makes good business for a company like Nike, but there are so many others.
Thank you. I mean, of course, looking at myself, into social justice, I as I told you, I used to live in Alabama, so I have seen many things that I shouldn't have seen. But then I'll be honest, I come from a place of privilege. Even though, some people could say, oh, you had a tough childhood and so on. But yes, there's tough and there's tough. I was never, ever discriminated against in my own country, right?
Right.
So there's another question, it's like, how can those of us in the privilege reduce this privilege so that we have more justice?
It's really a fundamentally difficult question, because why should someone with privilege give up privilege, right? You worked for privilege, like generationally, you've tried to achieve privilege, right?
I was born into this. I didn't do anything for it.
Yeah, or you're born into it. What I'm saying, but like it's a collective result of a lot of different factors that have led to having privilege. I consider the fact that I was born in America to be a tremendous privilege. Actually, as I've lived and moved around the world. versus someone who's born in Cambodia, as an example. I mean, you look at the two of our lives just based on where we were born. I had nothing to do with that, right? So looking at your example, looking even at my example of privilege, why is it valuable to level the playing field? Why is that good? Well, once again, because we need to create a future, and the future comes from people being inspired and engaged to work for a greater purpose. And if it takes me giving away some of my privilege so that somebody else can come in and feel more belonging and feel that they are important and they can contribute to this cause, then it's more than worth it for me to give away my privilege. Actually, we're not losing anything. Actually, nothing is being lost. I mean, privilege is a perceptual thing that goes back to the systemics, you know, racism, ageism, you know, economicism, whatever it is. It's not a real thing. You may earn it, you may have it, but it's just as easy to transport that or transfer that to somebody else and help bring them up to the same level. I talk about in the book the gender pay gap as an example. Why should men want women to be equally compensated for the same work?
I could say a lot here.
Huh?
I could say a lot on this topic.
Besides it being just fundamentally fair, besides fairness, if you don't like fairness as an argument, because we've seen, we shouldn't even have to use empirical proof, there's so many studies that show that when women are paid more, compensated more equitably according to their male counterparts, they deliver a greater innovation and returns for organizations. We shouldn't even have to use empirical proof when it's just the right thing to do. The point is that we need a lot of different types of people, and in order for them to pursue these paths, they need to see equitable compensation. So in order for women not to give up on the corporate ranks, they need to see that they're going to be treated exactly the same way as anyone else in those roles, or else they disengage. So inequity fundamentally leads to disengagement. If you want engagement, you address inequities. And that's the link between inequity and engagement. Justice is a whole different thing. Justice is just doing what's right. You know, doing what's right. It's not even about fairness. It's about basically making sure that you eradicate things that are negative in your environment, things that are actually denigrating people or making them, for example, you know, sexual harassment is a fundamental injustice that still exists in far too many corporations. Women being treated as second-class citizens in so many of these corporations because they're male-dominated. That's an injustice that has to be eradicated. It's not even about equity. It's purely about treatment of others in this environment. And that's how you basically, and that's social justice. I mean, you deal with the social justice. You eliminate bad actors from your organization, because, you know, in the 90s when we were training on social sexual harassment, we didn't get rid of the bad actors. We just did training. We tried to train it out of people, and it created even worse environments for women. It just went undercover. So you have to have a disciplinary matrix. You have to actually eliminate and remove bad actors from the system in order for you to have justice. Just like in all of these social justice protests, it's about making sure that the police officers are held accountable for murder, for what equates to be murder. So you don't hold them accountable by sending them home and not giving them a payment. You hold them accountable by firing them, and more so prosecuting them and putting them in jail for murder, which any other human who committed that same crime would be put in jail. That's justice. So we have to make sure we actually are delivering justice. And sometimes justice is, you know, getting rid of people. Sometimes justice is prosecuting people. Sometimes that's what it takes to make the point to everyone else in the organization that we take this topic very seriously. I mean, there's no excuse for sexual harassment of any kind in any organization in 2021. There's never been an excuse. But now, you know, it has to be weeded out at its source and not excused for.
And I really believe that it will be, but I also know that there is still a very, very long road ahead and we all have to have patience, and we all have to step up. And those of us who are leaders have to step up into, those Jedi values, which I will repeat. So again, guys, Jedi is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I believe that when the leaders really step up and embrace these values and become Jedi leaders, we will have better workplaces, we will have better society, we will have better life quality. And isn't this what we all ultimately want?
It's what we say we want. So it's time for us to actually stop talking about it and start being about it, start doing the work, no matter how hard it is. There's low-hanging fruit that can be easily tackled, and there's difficult to pick fruit, intrinsic negative fruit that have to be, kind of weeded out, like these, these issues. We talked, just two of them. We talked about sexual harassment. We talked about, the pay gap. I mean, these are not hard things to fix. They're not hard to fix. They just need to be fixed immediately, post haste.
I agree with you. And I also know that you need to run because you have many meetings, because the book is coming out on Friday. So guys,
yes,
is when you can buy Be a Jedi Leader, Not a Boss, this Friday, 25th June. So before I let you go, what is your final advice for young generation of leaders who would want to embrace this Jedi leadership style?
So I think you have to decide what is your reason for wanting to become a leader in the first place? Is it for the ego or for others? So ask yourself that question. Are you in it to provide value to other people and to develop and inspire and see collective good be done? Is that why you're in it? Or are you in it for selfish concerns? If you're in it for selfish concerns, please don't apply for management positions. If you're in it, we have enough of those people. If you're in it for, you want to really develop and inspire others, and also that's the real value you get as a leader is when you see. It feels like when you're an orchestra conductor and you've done the training and basically all of your instrumentalists, your orchestra is in front of you and you're playing that very difficult piece perfectly in front of an audience, and you feel the sound of all those instruments washing over you. Like nobody hears it like the composer hears it, And so that feeling is what we should be doing it for. Like that, the harmony that comes from all of these disparate, talents and instruments being utilized at their optimum capacity. That is the dream of leadership, really, to make that wonderful harmony, those wonderful noises. And I think if you're in it to make great music, then you should become a leader. But if you're in it to be a soloist, then stay a soloist. I mean, play, be a flautist, be first chair, but just don't become the orchestra conductor, because we need people who want to hear other instruments and who are focused on the group and not themselves.
And there wouldn't be much music without a conductor.
No.
This is the role that is really necessary to put all of these wonderful artists and experts together, right? To create
exactly.
Beautiful music. And
exactly. That's my final word on this is aspire to being a conductor, not to be, make it about yourself.
Not to be a diva.
Exactly.
Omar, this is beautiful. And I am so grateful that you've had time today. I know how busy you are because the book is coming out and there are many promotional meetings that you have to attend. So I really appreciate that you've taken so much time to talk to us.
I appreciate you.
And I hope our young leaders are going to buy your book and learn so much from it. Where can they find more information about you, and how can they follow you, how they can connect with you?
So my website is www.omarlharris.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I hope everybody who watches this links in with me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn.com, Omar L. Harris. You can find me on LinkedIn. Twitter, Strengths Leader. If you're on Twitter, you can follow me on Strengths Leader. But I think those are probably the three best places to connect and for us to have this conversation. I love mentoring. I love coaching, executive coaching, others as well. So if you want more hands-on approach for how to do this other than just reading the books, then I can also offer that to you as well. But more importantly, I just hope that this inspires you to want to look at and take different paths other than what you've been shown, by those above you in the organization, and realize that you can be just as successful, if not more successful, being a servant leader or being a Jedi leader than being a toxic boss. You can still achieve everything you want to achieve, but just do it in a way that doesn't burn yourself or anyone else in the organization out.
Thank you. This is really great advice. And just the last thing, the free gift that we mentioned already.
Yes.
We will put the link later, but can you just tell us what?
Yes. So the free gift is going to be a bundle of my 3 books. So basically, you're going to get all 3 books in digital format, bundled up, so you can read Leaderboard: The DNA of High Performance Teams, Leaderboard: The Servant Leader's Manifesto, and Be a Jedi Leader, Not a Boss. My only ask is that if you love the book, please put a review on Amazon.com, or all the books, please review on Amazon.com. That's all I ask of you, and also that you implement, you take the ideas forward and into your organizations and try to make the change happen.
True leaders walk their talk. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Omar L. Harris. Thank you so much, and good luck with the book, and let it be a great hit for the good of all of us. Thank you so much, Omar.
Thank you very much. Great seeing you again. Take care.
Thank you.